Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut.
Yassas. Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Today with me, I have Jonathan Schmuel, and he is the CEO of Aleph.im. So before we go any further, hello, Jonathan. How are you?
Hello. Really nice being here. I'm pretty great. Thanks. How are you?
Excellent. Just pretty great. Is it sunny where you are?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, you know what? For me, it doesn't even matter if it's raining or sunny. I'm just happy. I love the rain, so I'm not really immune to any of that. I just, the fact that I wake up the next day, I'm happy enough. Okay, well, look, you have this amazing company called Aleph. Now, what I would like you to do, we're going to go into who you are and, how you have done what you've done in terms of coming to this point and having Aleph in your life. But what I want you to first do is explain, it says, there's a simple statement on your website at Aleph.im, and it says cloud computing for DeFi and Web3 simplified. So maybe the first thing I want you to do is explain, even before you go into what Aleph does, because this is also an educational podcast, let's do a quick definition of Web3.
It's a good question. Web 1 was the web that was invented at the beginning using Mosaic as a web browser. Well, mostly using Mosaic as a web browser. The web was a set of pages that you could link and go from one page to another. That was nice, but not really interactive. Then came the first web services, where everyone could have his own web page, and then you could go from one web page to another, and then came the web services, and this was Web 2. Web 2 was the beginning of web services, as in services is not just a web page, it's a program that runs on a server and fetches you information, etc. That was social networks, it was also e-commerce, etc. And it was some kind of a great boom of the web in Web 2, because in Web 1 they tried to do it, but it wasn't quite great. And in Web 2, it was the broadband era, and that's where Google thrived, Facebook thrived, and then Twitter, etc. But it was a web of silos as in each web service has its own database that doesn't interact with others. If you have one data in Twitter, you don't have it in Facebook. If you have it in Facebook, you won't have it in X or Y. Well, it works. It's not great. More importantly, you go on servers of a single company. You don't own your own data. If they want to deplatform you, they can. If they want to edit your data, they can. If they want to read your data, they can. From this idea, the Web3 is born. The Web3 means that you own your own data. It's decentralized. You can self-host it if you want. And if you don't, it's okay. You can also use third-party servers, but you know what you are doing. And more importantly, things are trying to be end-to-end encrypted, even if not everywhere in Web3, but that would be like an ideal case where you own your data. More importantly, you can move your data from one place to another, and it's not an issue. So that's what is Web3 in simple terms.
Well, that's pretty fantastic definition. It also says on your site, cloud computing for DeFi and Web3 simplified. And of course, I can see why DeFi applications will want to be in a Web3 environment. It's going to be something, obviously, which is going to ensure even more security, which is something that people who really go for DeFi, this is one of the things that they really like about DeFi in itself. So tell us more about how your project is supporting the DeFi world.
What we provide is as stated, cloud computing We are providing storage as in file storage, storage as in database entries, because any website is like a glorified database today, and also computing as in serverless computing. For those who know, it's a bit like Amazon Lambda. When you make a query, it starts a virtual machine behind the scene, resolves your query, do computation, etc., give you a result, and then if the virtual machine is not used anymore, it just discards. Well, that's what we are providing in a decentralized way. So with these 3 building blocks, we can have a full cloud computing that is running on some kind of virtualized cloud that is decentralized. And for decentralized finance, most of the DeFi products, I say most because there are some that are really trying on doing a good job, but most of them use centralized servers. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, you will interact with smart contracts. That's cool. But then for indexing, to like show you data quickly, to like have a nice front end, etc., they use centralized servers. And then if a government or an agency or whoever says they should be stopped, they can, because they have one server or two. And then it's not decentralized. So what we are offering is to like help them host it on a decentralized cloud, and we also help them with indexing services, which allows them to like get data from the blockchain in a simple way to present to their users.
Well, I also see, according to your site, you have you're inviting people to try out your dApps, your decentralized applications. And the first, you have one that says you're 2 clicks away from backing up your NFT, which we all know from 1,000 podcasts. And if our listeners don't know anything about NFTs, you surely have at least 30 podcasts to choose from. But your non-fungible tokens, people can back them up 2 clicks away with one of your dApps. What's that about?
Just like for DeFi, there are some centralized servers. Well, for NFT, it's the same, because you have the ownership that is on chain. You have a smart contract that says, okay, this NFT ID is currently owned by this address. Well, okay, that's cool. But your NFT is also most of the time some kind of artwork with what we call metadata. A metadata file for an ERC 721 NFT is a JSON file which is a formatting system that gives a name, a description, sometimes a picture, a video, etc. This metadata file is on URL link from the smart contract. But if this URL is stored on a centralized server, then anyone can like change it and it can't be verified. Then the same way, inside it, if there is a link to like a picture or a video, if it's stored on a centralized server, it can disappear. Like even if it's on IPFS, which is a decentralized storage system, on IPFS, someone needs to like pin it and store it. And if the owner of the NFT stops paying for it, it will disappear. So what we are providing as a service is that the user can come, he will insert data from his NFT so that our DApp can find it, and then the DApp will find it. If it's on IPFS, it will pin it on our network. If it's not, it will download everything, put it on IPFS, and pin it so that it can't disappear with time.
That's amazing. We actually did a podcast. We've done a couple of podcasts on problems with NFTs. The famous blockchain /NFT lawyer Lewis Cohen in New York. And he was actually talking about the instability and the downside of basically people buying NFTs and they disappear because of the very problem with metadata that you just highlighted. So this is a pretty brilliant solution. I mean, just in itself, this one dApp that you guys have, this is something which I didn't even know about until obviously we were going to do this podcast. I think that a lot of people will find that useful. But before we go into even more minutia of everything, I really need to understand, how did you get into this space? Aleph has been selected. Of course, Aleph is a company. A company is run by people like yourself. You were selected for Ubisoft's Entrepreneurs Lab. So how are you a developer by trade? How did you get into this space? How long have you been in blockchain?
I started doing open source for a lot of years. Even when I was in school, I was already contributing to a lot of open source projects, Linux distribution, etc. I'm a developer for a very long time. I've started having computers when I was a really little kid, and I started with BASIC, etc. back then. As in blockchain, I started a bit with Bitcoin, but it was only about money, wasn't really programmable back then. So I kind of drifted away. And then I came back when Web3 came to the table with Ethereum. That's where I really entered the blockchain space. And I started contributing to a few open source projects. Among those, there was Nulls, which is a Chinese blockchain, and I was in the community developers because I was contributing as an open source developer. And then we wanted to create big decentralized application, and there wasn't any solution allowing us to do it. If you wanted to create a network or a Facebook or whatever, you couldn't. And that's how Aleph.im was born. Then it became a project of its own, and I started getting a team around it, etc. And that's how it all started.
Now that you see, obviously, where everything is kind of going, and I'm sure you've seen the news that now Mark Zuckerberg is... Sorry, every time I say his name, I just laugh. He's always doing something ridiculous. I mean, ridiculous sometimes in a good way and ridiculous sometimes in a bad way. But Facebook is about to hire 10,000 developers in the EU to work on this thing called the Metaverse. I'm sure you know about this. Basically, the Metaverse is this online world where people can game and work and communicate in this virtual environment using VR, mainly VR headsets. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg has been going on about this for, probably as long as he's been going on about Libra or DM or whatever the latest name for his project in blockchain and crypto is. He's really looking to go into that arena in a heavy way. And he has invested, I think, approximately $50 million US into assisting groups, into helping him, to basically fund groups to help him build this metaverse. And he's giving it around 10 years. So how do you see the future? I mean, he obviously sees the future as very VR. He sees this as the way that the universe is going. How do you see things rolling out? And do you see your company going more into maybe this metaverse direction? Or do you think it's just eventually the Web 3.0 is going to somehow happily merge and like DNA interweave with this metaverse idea? Or just your opinion on that?
The main issue with that view of the metaverse is that it's really centralized by a company. And if we want to have a metaverse, a real metaverse, it needs to be decentralized. In the same way that Web 1 was the big leap because it was decentralized, it was inherently decentralized. Any web page was running on different servers from a lot of people, etc. In the same way that back then in France, there was like an ancestor of the web, which was called the Minitel in France, but it was totally centralized and it never caught up. And then the web arrived and just took the spot because the former one was centralized. And it just doesn't work. If you want to have the diversity and if you want to have the world joining in, you need decentralization. If not, it won't work. You just have a new one coming 2 weeks later, a year later, just like Facebook is now being a bit phased out by like newer networks. Well, that's the same. If you want something to get up to speed, if you want to have something that will stay relevant, it needs to be decentralized. It needs to evolve with time, etc. So that's why I think that it's the good direction, but the direction that they are taking isn't the good one, and someone will take a good one. And I really hope so, because if not, it will be a really dark future.
Yeah. You could actually sit here and in 1 minute think technology is really our friend, and then the next minute think technology will be the end of all of us. Yeah. I don't know which way to look. Every day my opinion's changing. Because, it is kind of cool, I guess, what he's doing, the idea that you can put on these virtual reality glasses and then make it feel like, you're having a real face-to-face chat with a friend. You can literally almost reach out and touch their face. Even though it's like Skype, but, in 3D. It's like everything that anyone sees in the movies, quite frankly. It's also cool, I guess, especially because you're very French. I'm very European myself as well as American, but it is very interesting that he's having this built in Europe. I guess because maybe he's just pissed at the U.S. government, who knows. But anyway, I just think that this is going to be a very interesting foray by Facebook. People are talking about how everything in the world of Web 3.0, it's basically the only place now that's left to go. Web 3.0 is everywhere. But how is it possible for all of these companies? They're not going to be able to interface quick enough, I don't think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, onto a Web 3.0 platform, are they?
Well, the thing is that there isn't one standard for Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is more like a general direction of decentralization the world, like making decentralized, making the web decentralized. Blockchain is a good way. It's not the only way. There is a lot of different ways to do it. There is a lot of projects, a lot of competing standards, etc. And only time will tell which one will be there. Just like Web 1 services stayed alive during the Web 2 era, just like real world store still work while e-commerce is thriving, well, it can still work together and there can still be links here and there, interfaces, etc. It's also a bit of decentralization in itself. What we are providing at Aleph.im is also a way so that they can just their existing stack inside our micro virtual machine infrastructure and it can work. So that in that way, they can also bridge faster towards a Web3 world.
You have companies who right now are raising tens of millions of dollars for Web 3.0 projects. And I can already see you're smiling. So, I mean, well, I got to know why, though. Okay, so before I even finish that question, why are you smiling so much? Are you one of those companies?
We are raising a bit, but it's way lower amounts, to be honest. I think that in the blockchain space, there is also an issue is that there is a lot of companies that are raising insane amount of money just based on hype. It's a bit sad to see, to be honest.
That's everything in crypto right now. You have the problem is, and I'm sure you recognize this, and especially if you listen to any of these podcasts, you know that you do have some companies who are saying, okay, like for instance, Epic Game stores are going to welcome NFTs after Steam has banned them. Because basically Steam is saying, look, there's too many scams, there's too much grifting going on, we don't want any part of that. We understand that it's on blockchain, and even though we like blockchain, we're not happy with the products that are coming off of it. Basically, Epic, even though they earlier said they wouldn't touch NFTs because of scams, they're now going into it. It just seems like everyone, they're changing their minds constantly based on if they can make money out of this. And of course, there's a lot of people out there who don't understand anything to do with blockchain. They don't understand blockchain technology. Of course, you have the biggest use of blockchain in the retail sector is obviously crypto. And you have people who believe tweets that come from anyone who might have an Instagram following, such as Elon Musk or Kim Kardashian, believe it or not. They tweet something out and people think that they should be buying it. And this is one of the reasons why you have people like Dr. Michael Burry, the guy from The Big Short, who comes out and he says, this may not turn out to be the happy ending everyone's looking for, because instead of allowing this to kind of grow organically and do the right thing, you have a lot of people, like you just said, who are jumping on key phrases and raising money from investors who also, quite frankly, know nothing. And it's very easy, I think, sometimes to wow people with really big words. Trust me, I know this firsthand. I could give a lot of examples, but it would just embarrass people. But anyway, the whole point I'm making here is companies on a daily basis, they're changing their minds. Jamie Dimon's a great example. Hates crypto, goes into it. Bashes Bitcoin, buys it. I mean, it's you can't even keep up with the kind of almost, and I don't want to say two-faced. Not only is it confusing for everyone because companies and people of high net worth are 1 minute bashing it, next minute going into it and hyping it. So not only do people not understand it in the first place, but then the messages that are kind of going out from, like I just said, companies like Epic and Steam, and then people who are out there, even if somebody was interested in it, the next thing you know, they're getting confused because the messaging is constantly, it's very fragile, the messaging changes very frequently. And quite frankly, a lot of people also see many times like the downside of this. And that's the thing. If you're building a good technology, like if you're building something in the space that you are, which is about building something that's decentralized, which we're going to talk about that in a minute, there's still a lot of education that needs to kind of go on out there. And actually, I'm just going to say this one last thing, and then I'm going to let you actually respond to all of this, because you then have platforms like Compound. In DeFi, there's a massive lending platform called Compound, and they sent out 89 million worth of crypto to their users, and that's a huge glitch, isn't it? And then, so they accidentally sent it out, and now the CEO is asking the users to voluntarily return the funds. So there's still a lot of issues going on out there. The question, I guess, is, first of all, how can people, there's two questions. How can people possibly really grasp, and when I say people, I also mean major companies, who I guess would be the people who would be your clients, your end users. How are these companies going to understand and believe in a technology which, quite frankly, is decentralized and makes them somehow feel like they're losing control or don't have absolute control over something? But how are companies going to be able to trust in a system which is decentralized? That's number one. And then question number two is, in terms of the DeFi setting, when you've got companies who are making mistakes and sending out, where there's, about the Poly network, they had their $650 million hack, which of course was returned to them by Mr. White Hat. And then you have this 89 million worth of crypto from Comp crypto, which was accidentally sent out by the company. So that's a company mistake. So Comp is decentralized, and they sent out this 89 million worth of crypto, which they can't get back unless users send back to them. So what kind of messages what do you think companies are thinking about a decentralized system at this moment?
It's a good question. Well, for the first question, there is a lot of unpack there. I think that it's the way the world is evolving, and you can't go against it. In the same way that Steam just banned crypto projects, etc. Well, games that are generating crypto. What will happen when one of the big publishers gets a game out that everyone wants to play and it's not on Steam, but everywhere else? It's the same for like every kind of companies. They won't want to be left out. And I saw something that was really nice in an article lately. The Kodak effect is a real thing. No company wants it, but a lot of companies are still falling for it, starting to act like Kodak did. But in the end, if they want to survive, they need to change. That's why a lot of executives change their mind, because they want their company to survive. And the most intelligent people know how to change their mind with time. And it's not a bad thing. I think that they will all come to it. As for the effect of hacks, etc., on the image, yep, it's not really good, but technology evolves with time, and those are young mistakes on first issues with a new technology, and it will just get better with time, I think.
Do you think, in terms of how companies view decentralized platforms, and of course you have these hybrid models. You have these hybrid models where you have part public, part private blockchains, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of company do you think is going to want to actually go full steam ahead on a decentralized platform that is right now in the Fortune 500 mainstream?
I know of a bit. Unfortunately, I'm under NDA.
Oh, okay. Well, we will not go there then. Facebook just had this blackout as well, and I don't mean to focus on Facebook today. It just happens to be that this topic kind of slides in nicely with what you're doing. But Facebook, when they just had their blackout, a lot of people had a lot of ideas how Web 3.0 could help against that kind of thing happening. So Is this something as well that you're looking into in terms of downtime and how actually your platform would be able to help override any issues that companies like this could be having?
Definitely. The thing with Facebook is that if you don't have access to like their servers, you don't have access to it and you can't see anything. If Facebook was hosted on a network like Aleph.im, you could just go on another end of the network on another cluster of servers, on like another RPC endpoints or whatever, and you would still have access to it. Then it's just a matter of the front end pointing to like one server or another. And if the front end is open source as well, you could have people hosting their own front end on like accessing it from their own servers if they wanted. So that there wouldn't be that huge downtime because it's like redundant from the beginning. And like if you have one part of the network that like goes down, you have another one that still works. So something like that couldn't happen on a network like Aleph.im.
Brave, as you know the Brave platform, they came out with a research paper, and the name of the paper is Privacy and Security Issues in Web 3.0. It came out in September. Did you see it by any chance?
No, unfortunately, no.
Okay, well, that's not a problem. I mean, basically, what they're saying is that despite the lightweight front ends of many DeFi solutions, many DeFi sites are obviously relying on third parties. And by mistake, I'm going to paraphrase all this, they occasionally even leak Ethereum addresses to those third parties, which are mainly API and analytics providers. Now, the Ethereum address leakage to Google is very problematic, obviously, because the company already has information about you, which then they link to your Ethereum address, which is then linked to your transaction history. And then, of course, not only can Google do what they want with that data, but they can monetize that data like they do with everything else, and which no one actually really seems to care about. Nobody cares about that, by the way. They really don't. They take it almost as a transaction in itself. They have the use of this handy-dandy search engine, and in exchange for that, they're happy to give over all of their information. And that's fine if people want to do that. With Web 3.0, is that security, which of course, like you said, you guys have the solution also for DeFi, but is that security really going to be there? Is that security really going to be a countermeasure against this kind of data harvesting?
Just like you mentioned before, like raising money, etc., we aren't raising huge amount of money. And like a lot of investors aren't really interested in what we are doing because we don't gather information on like a lot of investors ask us, yeah, but how many queries do you have? How many exact users do you have for this feature? Well, we don't know because we don't store data on any of our users. We don't use Google Analytics. We don't use a lot of these items. And the data that is stored is the data that is necessary for the use of the service, but nothing more. It's a bit weird to say, but we don't want to like track our users. But then if a developer does an application based on Aleph.im, we have no control on what they do. If they include Google Analytics inside the web page, then Google has the data. And I think that it's also education to do towards developers to tell them, okay, you won't have exact data on that, but you could have other data. You could see what message users send. Then you could know how many users you have, but just don't track visits to your website because it doesn't matter and it will only make things worse. So that's a bit of education for like investors and developers, etc.
It's pretty sad that that is the thing that's turning a lot of people on. But of course, it all leads to money, doesn't it? That's what people want. They want big data has always been an industry. If we go towards this Web 3.0, and like you said, there's already solutions out there. They don't all depend on being blockchain-based solutions. How is it then that any decentralized 3.0 solution then is going to be of interest to any investor? Because certainly it's going to be the same, especially if it is de facto decentralized. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the whole point of decentralized. So how does that work for any of these people who are trying to raise money? How in the world are any companies in the space then going to be appealing?
There is something that is quite nice, which is the token economy, which means that a utility token has the value that is linked to like its actual utility. So that means that some people could think that it could appreciate in value, etc. So that's one way. There is another way, which is the actual value of what is generated by the platform. I am thinking of like NFT, etc., play to earn in the gaming way. So that's another way. And I think that there is new ways of monetization that needs to be invented. It's a new market, it's a new paradigm, it's a new way of thinking things. So we need to like break away from the advertisement industry. We need to break away from all the paradigms that made Web2 companies successful. They won't work for Web3. At least not if we are really going full into Web2 product. Into Web3, you aren't the product. You are paying for your use of the product, etc. It's a bit different as a paradigm.
Question is, when do you see mainstream, real 100% adoption of Web 3.0, in its current form that you guys are heading towards?
I would say between 5 to 10 years, something like that.
So around the time Metaverse will be happening. Oh my God. So what's going on then with your own roadmap? So you're just going after like funding right now and trying to get people to invest in you?
Currently we are working a lot on indexing for Solana projects. We are looking at data happening on Solana because Solana has a lot of data happening all the time. It's a bit like the internet. Trying to like index all of it is really hard. Only governments can do it. Well, I think that in the end for Solana it will be the same. So what we are doing is that we are indexing protocols directly inside our micro virtual machine cloud swarm. So like we have a lot of smaller indexers that are taking data happening on chain and like serving it as GraphQL endpoints. GraphQL is a standard for like querying data and like getting data back. And we are providing that data thanks to like these endpoints on these indexers. We are working a lot on this currently. We are also working on expanding our micro virtual machine network, making it scale, and we will release in the few coming months our incentive program for the resource nodes that will run those virtual machines so that anyone can like start a node and like start getting paid to like run a computing node. And then next year it will be the same for the file storage node, and we will have a new payment system on the network coming right after. We have a lot of projects going on with a lot of partners as well. And we are also hiring a lot of new developers and people, etc. to like help us. So we are currently scaling.
You're really incentivizing people right now to put up master nodes. Is that what you just said?
It's not really master nodes. We have what we call the core channel nodes, which are the controllers of the network. We don't have a fancy mechanism like proof of space and time or whatever. We are doing simple quality control on the network. We have nodes that are dedicated to control that other nodes are really doing their job. And those are the core channel nodes. You need a certain amount of Aleph to like start them and then have people staking Aleph into them so that they are active. But then we have what we call the resource nodes, which are actually doing the job. These will get incentivized to run so that critical data of the network always stays accessible. Then as more people are using the network, they will get paid directly by the usage of the computation power on the network.
Well, what's the name of your coin? Aleph?
Yes.
How much Aleph does somebody have to, I guess, stake? What do you run on?
Yes.
So what are you, proof of stake?
No, it's not really a proof of stake. We don't have a consensus mechanism. What we do is that we go and write regularly on blockchains, currently Ethereum, and we are working on doing this on Solana as well. And then the order of the messages that have been written on chain is the source of truth, so that we use the mechanism of the underlying chain for security. But to like start a core channel node, you need 200,000 Aleph to like start it, and then have people staking 500,000 Aleph into it so that it starts work.
I'm looking up how much Aleph is.
Currently, one Aleph is around 55 cents, but by the time the podcast goes out, it might change a bit.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you've seen the price of Bitcoin, you'll know that everything is changing right now. And no doubt the more it goes up, the harder you guys work. So far, what we know is one thing for sure. And that is that the whole purpose, and this is pretty much what you said, the whole purpose of Web 3.0. It's to enable this decentralized economy. And all the tech for this is obviously already existing. Okay, so basically what you're allowing people to do, because you're working cross-chain, you have compatibility with a number of blockchains like Ethereum and Polkadot and Cosmos and Binance. So you're taking the ability for anyone to work with any of these chains and you're pulling it together into this one solution. Is that correct?
What we are allowing developers to do is to choose one chain or many, do their own chain things on it. Then the Aleph.im network will take care of all the rest. All the off-chain things that they would need, they can do it. On our network, accept addresses from a lot of blockchains, Ethereum, Polkadot, Cosmos, Solana, etc. And we accept messages from all these blockchains so that the same wallet that their users used to do actions on-chain can be used to do actions off-chain on the Aleph.im network. Really nice things is happening on the indexing side on Solana. I think that we will get really, really, really big traction out of it because Solana is really growing. Mm-hmm. So I'm really bullish on Solana, and we are enabling a lot of new use cases on Solana. So that's pretty great. One that is live is for example, for trading on Ethereum, you can go to uniswap.info to being able to see pools history, etc. Mm-hmm. Well, we have built the same for a few AMM on Solana, so that you have radium.info, saber.markets, and a few others upcoming ones, so that you can see it. And we will also work on one to aggregate all these trading data on Solana. And we are also planning to doing the same for lending protocols on Solana and for a lot of other similar things. The idea is that you can see the data on what's happening on chain and act on it. So that's pretty cool. And it wasn't possible before we did it. As for outside of pure directly blockchain, one thing that I'm really, it's still blockchain, but on the NFT space, what I'm really hyped about is makeable NFTs that where every action is registered. Because right now, if you have mutable NFTs, meaning that the metadata of your NFT can change with time, mm-hmm. and this is really useful for the gaming industry, because if you are using a gun and you have success linked to it, etc., the game can update it with time, for example, then your NFT, right now, if the metadata can change with time, it needs to be on a centralized server. Mm-hmm. If that metadata links to a micro VM on the Aleph.im network, the micro VM can recompute the current state based on decentralized database entries on our network. On each database entries has a signature, and you can see the whole history, meaning that a mutable NFT, you can see the whole history of the NFT and verify that everything has been signed. So we can enable mutable, verifiable, and decentralized NFT, and it's a big deal for the gaming industry.
And we all know the gaming industry loves anything that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So do the investors in the gaming industry. All I can say now is that the future is bright. The future is Aleph.im. And I'd like to thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk. You have a lot going on there, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see and watch what you guys are doing in this entire space. I just think it's going to be a really great opportunity for you have so much going on in terms of who you're working with as well. You have a lot of stuff going on with Solana, like you were just saying, and a lot of other companies.
Thank you very much for having me today. It was a really great conversation. Thank you very much. And I think that we'll be surprised by what will be happening in the next few months, because I think that things might go a bit crazy around blockchain, and it will be really great to see.
Things are always crazy around blockchain. If it weren't, we wouldn't have a podcast. Well, again, thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk. And I'd like to thank all of our listeners. And I'd like to ask you to please ask your friends and family to download our podcast on one of the many podcasting platforms that we stream these on. The whole list is on our website, cryptoandblockchaintalk.com. There's a list on Crypto and Blockchain Talk of many of of the podcasting platforms that carry us, including iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, you name it. We're on all the major ones, plus many, many more. There's over 70 different podcasting platforms now that stream our podcast. In addition, all of these interviews will be streamed on our sister radio station, crypto24radio.com. That's crypto24radio.com, where we play this, music, and more 24/7 around the world. Furthermore, you can get in touch with us by either communicating on our social media accounts of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can do our favorite method of communication, which is just emailing us directly. And that email is education@savvydigital. That's education@savvy, SAVII digital.com. We love when you tune into our podcast. It means everything to us. We want to thank you so much for being our listeners. So please be safe, take care, and goodbye for now.